Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with it before you answer. When was the last time you were in a room full of people? People who were laughing, talking, drinking, living, and you felt completely, utterly alone? Not sad, not angry, just separate. Like there was a pane of glass between you and everyone else, and you could see them. You could hear the muffled sound of their world, but you could not enter it. And the strange part, the part that frightened you, was that you didn't entirely want to. You smiled, you nodded, you said the right things at the right moments. You played your part. But somewhere inside you, something was watching all of it, like a stranger watching a foreign film without subtitles. Present, observing, but not belonging. And afterward, driving home, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, the question came, and it always comes eventually. The question that polite society does not want you to ask. The question that your friends, your family, your colleagues, even your own mind tries to wave away with distractions and noise, and you're just tired. Get some sleep. The question is this: what if the disconnection I feel is not a flaw? What if it is a message? I am going to tell you something today that nobody has bothered to tell you. Or perhaps they have tried, and you were not ready to hear it. That feeling of not fitting in, that quiet, persistent, sometimes aching sense that the life around you no longer contains you properly, is not depression. It is not ingratitude. It is not something broken in your wiring that needs to be fixed with medication or mindfulness or a better morning routine. It is a warning. And warnings, by their nature, must be heeded, the human soul. And I use that word deliberately, because the psyche is far more than the brain, far more than chemistry. The human soul does not drift. It does not become restless without cause. It does not suddenly develop a longing for something it cannot name out of boredom or ingratitude. When a person begins to feel that their relationships are hollow, that their ambitions feel borrowed, that the role they play every day is a costume they put on and take off, this is not weakness. This is the self beginning to speak. Most people silence it. They work harder. They scroll longer. They drink more, eat more, talk more, fill the silence with anything that will delay the conversation the soul is trying to have with them. Because that conversation is not comfortable. It will not arrive with warmth and reassurance. It arrives with demands. It arrives with a kind of grieving. It arrives by dismantling things you thought were settled. Your identity, your certainties, your image of who you are supposed to be. I have seen it happen again and again. A man reaches his 40s, and all the things he built, the career, the image, the competence, the controlled life, begin to feel like a cage he designed himself. A woman in her 30s finds herself weeping without knowing why, because from the outside, everything looks fine. A young person who has done everything right, the grades, the plans, the prescribed steps, feels a hollowness they cannot explain because nobody told them that doing everything right and becoming yourself are not the same journey. They all had the same question: why don't I fit in anymore? And the answer, the real answer, is always the same. Because you are being called inward. And inward is not where the world you have built exists. There is a process that happens in the life of every person who is willing to take themselves seriously. It is not always dramatic. It does not always arrive with crisis, though crisis often accelerates it. Sometimes it arrives softly, like a tide going out, leaving familiar shores looking suddenly exposed and strange. What was once satisfying becomes insufficient. What was once enough becomes a question mark. The friends who used to feel like home begin to feel like company you keep out of habit. The conversations that used to sustain you begin to feel like noise. And the world, the collective, the group, the tribe, the world does not like this. The world has a profound investment in your staying the same. Not because the world is malicious, but because the world is a mirror. It reflects back what it needs from you. Your family needs you to be who they have always known. Your colleagues need you to fulfill your function. Your social circles need you to play your role so that everyone can continue playing theirs. The moment you begin to change, truly change, from the inside, the world around you becomes uncomfortable. People push back. They joke about it. They express concern that is really anxiety. They ask if you are okay in a tone that actually means, please go back to who you were because your changing unsettles me. This is not cruelty. It is simply what happens when a living thing begins to grow in a direction the container was not built for. The container must either expand or the growing thing must break free of it. This is your warning. This feeling of not fitting. It is the feeling of a living soul that has grown larger than the life it was living. And that growth is not something to apologize for. It is not something to medicate or socialize away. It is the most fundamental impulse of the human psyche, to become more fully what it actually is, rather than what it has been told to be. But I must be honest with you here, because this is the part where the warning becomes genuinely urgent. There are two ways to respond to this feeling. The first way is the way most people choose, because it is the path of least resistance. You take the discomfort and turn it outward. You decide that the problem is the people around you, that your partner doesn't understand you, that your family is too small-minded, that your friends are too shallow, that society is too corrupt, that the world is too broken. You cast yourself as the sensitive one, the misunderstood one, the one who has seen through the illusion while everyone else sleeps. You build an identity around your alienation. You wear your disconnection like a badge. And this, I tell you plainly, is the most seductive trap the psyche offers, because it has just enough truth in it to be convincing. People around you may well be limited. Your family may not have the vocabulary for what you are experiencing. Society is, in many genuine ways, spiritually thin. But the moment you use your disconnection as a weapon against the world rather than a lantern pointed inward, you have stopped growing and started hiding. You have taken a living, urgent message and turned it into an excuse. And the soul knows the difference. The soul always knows the difference. And it will not be silenced. It will simply grow louder, more insistent, more painful, until you are finally still enough to listen. The second way is harder, and it is the only way that actually leads anywhere. You turn inward. Not in the soft, comfortable way that the word inner journey has been domesticated to mean. Not crystals and journals and weekend retreats, though none of those things are inherently wrong. I mean something far more demanding. I mean the willingness to look at everything you have called yourself and ask honestly, is this me? Or is this a performance I learned so well I forgot I was performing? I mean the willingness to sit with the parts of yourself you have kept in the dark. Not because they are evil, but because they were inconvenient or frightening or too strange for the life you were trying to live. Every human being carries a shadow, not metaphorically. Psychologically, practically, day to day, there is within each of us a repository of everything we could not afford to be. The sensitivity we were told was weakness. The ambition we were told was selfish. The grief we were told was self-indulgent. The wildness we were told was inappropriate. The faith we were told was naive. The doubt we were told was dangerous. All of it, packed away, pressed down, covered over with whatever personality we constructed to survive our particular family, our particular culture, our particular era. And it does not stay packed away. It surfaces in your irritability when you cannot explain why something bothers you. It surfaces in the sudden, irrational anger at someone who triggers something you do not yet recognize in yourself. It surfaces in your projection. The qualities you cannot stand in others are almost always the qualities you cannot yet acknowledge in yourself. It surfaces in your dreams, in your body, in your recurring patterns of relationships that somehow always end the same way. This is what you are being invited to look at, not as punishment, not as diagnosis, as material, as the raw substance of who you actually are, waiting to be integrated rather than suppressed. The life you were living, the one that no longer fits, was built on certain assumptions. Assumptions about what success looks like, about who you are supposed to be and for whom. about what is permissible to want, to feel, to become. Most of those assumptions were not chosen consciously. They were inherited from parents who themselves inherited them, from a culture that itself is operating largely unconsciously, repeating patterns it does not examine because examination is uncomfortable. You absorbed those assumptions before you were old enough to evaluate them. They became the architecture of your life. And for a time, perhaps a long time, that architecture was sufficient. It gave you structure. It gave you belonging. It gave you a role to play. And there is real comfort in having a role to play. Roles tell us what is expected. They save us from the terrifying freedom of not knowing who we are. But then something shifted. It always does, eventually. For some people, it is age. The arrival of midlife, not as a crisis, but as a reckoning. A moment when the scaffolding of the first half of life can no longer hold the weight of what is trying to emerge in the second half. For others, it is loss. The death of someone who was a cornerstone of your defined identity, leaving you suddenly unsure of who you are without them. For others still, it is achievement, reaching the summit of exactly what you were supposed to want and finding it insufficient, and then not being allowed to say so out loud because you are supposed to be grateful. The specific trigger matters less than the invitation it carries. The invitation is always the same. Stop living the unlived life. Stop being a careful, edited, socially approved version of yourself. Stop performing a character you inherited rather than chose, and begin. Slowly, imperfectly, with tremendous uncertainty, to become who you actually are. This is not a comfortable invitation. I will not stand here and tell you that this path is smooth. I will not tell you that once you begin listening to the part of yourself that no longer fits, everything will fall gently into place. That would be a lie, and you have had enough comfortable lies. What I will tell you is this. When you begin to genuinely change, when you stop suppressing the self and start listening to it, things will break. Some relationships cannot survive your growth, not because they were bad, but because they were built between a version of you that is being outgrown and a version of the other person who needed you to stay the same. Some of those endings will be painful beyond what you expected. You will grieve them. Allow the grief. The grief is real. It means something was real. Some of your certainties will crumble, things you were sure about. Your beliefs, your values, your understanding of right and wrong, your sense of what your life is for will come into question. This will be disorienting. It will feel, for a period, like you are losing your mind. You are not losing your mind. You are losing a mind that was too small for you. There is a difference, and the difference matters enormously. And there will be a period, it can last months, sometimes years, where you are neither who you were nor who you are becoming. You have left the familiar harbor but cannot yet see the next shore. This is the most dangerous time, because it is in this liminal space that people give up. They get frightened by the emptiness and rush back to the familiar, even when the familiar was suffocating them. They build new facades faster than they dismantle the old ones. They trade one persona for another and call it transformation. Real transformation does not feel like triumph while it is happening. It feels like loss. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like you have broken something precious before you understand what you are building. But beneath all of it, underneath the grief and the disorientation and the sleepless nights of wondering if you have made a terrible mistake, there is something else. Something quieter but more durable than anything the old life provided. It is the feeling of being real, not performing, not editing, not managing the impression you make or the version of yourself you offer to the world. Just real. Present in your own life in a way that you were not before, even when the life itself is messier, less certain, harder to explain to people who knew the old you. That realness is what you were always looking for. In every relationship where you felt unseen, in every achievement that didn't satisfy, in every room full of people where you felt that pane of glass between you and them. You were looking for a life in which your true self was the one doing the living. So let me speak directly to you now, not to an audience, to you. If you are sitting with this feeling, this ache of not belonging, this exhaustion with a life that used to fit and no longer does. Do not rush to diagnose it. Do not rush to fix it with external changes before you have understood what the internal change is asking for. Leaving a marriage is not the same as doing the interior work the marriage was asking you to do. Quitting a career is not the same as confronting the fear that drove you toward security at the expense of meaning. Changing your circumstances without changing yourself only guarantees that you will recreate the same circumstances in new locations with new faces. The change that is being asked of you is an inside job. It requires honesty, the kind that is not performed for anyone else, not posted anywhere, not dressed up in the language of inspiration. Just the raw, private honesty of sitting with yourself in silence and asking, what have I been running from? What have I been pretending? What do I actually want underneath the wanting I was taught to want? What does my life look like when I stop arranging it for approval? It requires patience, because the self does not reveal itself on demand. It reveals itself gradually, the way dawn comes, not all at once, but incrementally, the darkness thinning before you notice the light returning. And it requires courage, not the dramatic, public kind, but the private, daily kind. The courage to say a true thing when a comfortable lie is available. The courage to feel an uncomfortable feeling rather than reach for something to numb it. The courage to disappoint people who were depending on you to stay small. The world needs you to be yourself. I say this not as consolation, not as the kind of hollow encouragement that gets written on motivational posters without weight or meaning. I say it because it is true in the deepest possible sense. A person who is genuinely themselves, not a persona, not a performance, not a carefully managed image. A person who has done the work of becoming who they actually are. That person is rare, genuinely, startlingly rare. And their presence in the world has a quality that cannot be manufactured. They can be trusted because they are not managing you. They can be loved because there is actually someone there to love. They can create because they are creating from a real place rather than from ambition or approval seeking. They can lead because they have first led themselves through something. What the world does not need is more people performing competence and normalcy and acceptableness, while the real, strange, complex, potent version of themselves stays locked in a room nobody is allowed to enter. The feeling of not fitting in is a warning, but it is also an invitation. The warning is this: if you ignore what is rising in you, if you keep pressing it down and filling the space with noise and achievement and distraction, it will not disappear. It will intensify. The unlived life does not go quietly. It accumulates. It finds its way out through illness, through destruction, through sudden acts of self-sabotage that the conscious mind cannot explain. The longer you defer this reckoning, the more forcefully it arrives. The invitation is this: the discomfort you feel is evidence of your vitality. A dead thing does not long for more. A settled thing does not become restless. Only something alive enough to sense the distance between where it is and where it must go. Only that thing aches the way you ache. Your ache is not your illness. Your ache is your compass. Follow it. Not recklessly. Not dramatically. Not by burning down your life in the name of authenticity. But steadily, honestly, with the respect this process deserves. Follow it the way you would follow any deep truth. Slowly, rigorously, with your eyes open and your defenses lowered enough to actually see what you are looking at. The life you are meant to live is not somewhere outside you, waiting to be found in the right city or the right relationship or the right opportunity. It is inside you. It has always been inside you. It has been pressing against the walls of the life you constructed. That pressure, that sense of not fitting, is it trying to get your attention? It has your attention now. What you do with this moment is yours to decide, but decide consciously. Decide as someone who knows that the most important work of any human life is not what you build on the outside, but who you become on the inside. And that becoming, difficult, uncertain, disorienting, and ultimately irreplaceable, That becoming is what you are here for, not the performance, not the persona, not the version of you that was acceptable. You, the full, unedited, still becoming version of you. That is what the warning is asking for, and it has waited long enough.